Attack on Titan Season 4 Part 2 Episode 9 was the first time the anime version of the story happened to be worse than the manga one. This was a criminally bad adaptation for a series known for taking its source material to the next level. So we're going to be breaking down all the key differences you might have missed and the shocking ones you absolutely cannot. For more in-depth Attack on Titan videos, be sure to drop a like and subscribe to Plot Armor with notifications on, because when it comes to bringing you some of the best Attack on Titan content on the platform, Plot Armor has you covered. The episode opens up with John's ideal future, a dream in which he has a great home in a prime location and could enjoy the finest liquor at any time of day in leisure. This is the sort of future he had always aspired from the very beginning of the story, but of course, his chivalrous heart tends to oppose any sort of convenient logic his mind may come up with. The anime rendition of this scene as compared to the manga was pretty lame. In the manga, we got several proper looks at an even older version of John that truly did appear to be happy and at peace, properly conveying the whole point of the scene. Beyond John, however, we would have his wife and their child. Now this is very interesting, as this happy woman is actually Mikasa, and we know this for sure based on the scar on her face. John, since the very beginning of the story, had a crush on Mikasa, but of course, with her being as Eren-centric as she is, this sort of thing hasn't really been elaborated upon much since then. But yeah, he still likes her, and at that, notice that her hair here is long. Way back when, John admired and even worked up the confidence to compliment Mikasa's hair back when they were cadets, and it was long. Only for Eren, moments later, to somewhat rudely urge Mikasa to cut her hair, giving it the short appearance that she wears even to this day. And John having a kid here is a big deal. The desire to have a child and even grandchildren is really important, considering not only the sterilization plan provided by Zeke, but also the future of the Eldian people being persecuted by the rest of the world without the fulfillment of the rumbling thanks to Eren. Which then brings us to a much more completed version of a scene from the previous episode. Previously, we had John covering his ears and what appeared to be an attempt to dampen the noise produced by the seemingly endless march of colossal titans. However, it's with this that we learn that John was actually attempting to ignore the summons of Hange, who was at his window trying to get his attention. Now in the manga, this was a tad bit different in regards to the layout of the room. In the anime, we have a wall to his side and one of the beds nearest to him is empty, as opposed to the manga that had John surrounded by others in their respective beds. And I think the approach the anime decided to take here makes a lot more sense, simply because of just how loudly Hange was knocking. And with Hange being the commander with an eye patch that she is, she's pretty much like the Nick Fury to these would-be Avengers. And if you like stories related to the Avengers, then check out our brand new channel, Plot Armor Comics, for some of the best comic content available. Now yet again, as per usual, John could not remain oblivious and went to Hange. And it's the conversation that ensues that exposes what is arguably the worst thing about this adaptation. Although, it does get pretty bad later on, so let us know what you think in the comments. Here, Hange announces that they have joined up with the remaining Marleyan forces, including the Cart Titan, for the sake of stopping Eren. Now in the manga, John and Mikasa are visibly shocked. They even pause for a while with concern written all over their faces, which only intensifies further upon Mikasa's questioning as to how they go about doing it. Meanwhile, with the anime, they're completely stone-faced. They are suddenly told that they will be working together with the people who were trying to kill them for ages and attack them again not too long ago, and have absolutely no reaction to that whatsoever. And it's really weird. In the manga, when Mikasa declares that she will fight to stop Eren, both John and Hange are flabbergasted because, of course, everyone knows how strongly Mikasa feels about Eren and how willing she has been to do just about anything for him. The anime gave us Hange looking up at Mikasa upon being interrupted, followed by a still shot of the table and a window as she plainly said Mikasa's name. Then when John spoke about the weighty implications for the future of their people in the event of Eren's defeat, we continued to get this same shot of the table and window, but oh wait, not enough window? Don't worry, here you go. We would have a bit of John visibly speaking eventually, although it would be at the expense of Hange visibly speaking, as we instead are left to observe a periodically moved John. In the manga, we saw the escalation of these concerns written all over their faces, which emphasized the severe difficulty of their predicament. And John was right, without Eren, they would be living on borrowed time. If Eren isn't able to complete the rumbling, it would only further inspire the powers of the world to destroy them. Now, the part that disappointed me most about this exchange in the anime was Hange's refusal of genocide, and I know how that sounds, hear me out. In the manga, I remember this to be such a bold, powerful, and impactful moment, yet in the anime, it's severely muted and weak. So much so that when Hange apologized for yelling, I was a bit confused. Now, typically in anime, when an episode doesn't play the opening song, you can expect to be in for a wild ride. And that's kind of true for this one, but just in the worst ways possible. Now, Hange would comment that not a single one of their comrades who had died would have been as narrow-minded as to believe that bringing freedom to the island alone would be enough for them. And I think that is straight cap. Considering all that had been done to them and their people over the years, I think a desire for retribution is more than likely a possibility. I mean, that's the whole reason that Marley is set up the way that it is, to get revenge for what had happened to them in the past. So yeah, very naive thinking here. However, this would prompt John to think of Marco, and fair enough. Marco was honestly the best of them. He was genuinely a great person, and there's no way he would have been okay with this sort of thing going unchecked. And on that note, here is something that we will never receive in the anime. A drawing of Isayama himself of Marco had he managed to survive the Trost incident, if he hadn't been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Let us know what you think. Past that, we would have the most impressive visual display of the entire episode as Hange cut some potatoes, only making me miss Sasha that much more. The exchange between General Magath and John wasn't inherently bad or anything, but again, the expressions, the emotions, the emphasis, it was all lacking. And it's not as if they can't convey this sort of stuff properly in the anime, as they have been for years. I'd imagine that considering the corners being cut for the sake of conservation, the reasoning for which we will get to later on in the video, they had the voice talent keep things toned down a bit, as to have the vocal inflections be incredible while the visuals are less than ideal would only highlight the flaws that much more. Now, John and General Magath would argue like this for a while, and both had some pretty valid points. At the end of the day, it all goes back to the cycle of hatred and suffering, yet Hange, in the way that she attempts to dismiss this, is quite honestly pretty ignorant. She remarks that it is silly to talk about the past when none of them were there. I mean, that is just such a foolish outlook to have. However, the fact of the general being baffled by the existence of devils willing to abandon a proposed heaven was definitely an interesting realization for sure. But ultimately, these guys could not go back to being as ignorant as they were before they lived beyond the walls for months. The Survey Corps were believed to be the hope of humanity, primarily in their fight against Titans, but of course, knowing all that they know now, things are not so simple, and their direction has been challenged. Yet, the select few continue to fight for humanity as a whole. Now, when Annie questioned if Eren's friends could kill him, in the manga, Armin was caught off guard and would question her statement, whereas in the anime, it kind of just stood there. Annie and Mikasa would have their standoff, and maybe it's just me, but Mikasa's response was a bit excessive. Obviously, no one was going to let her just be killed here. Meanwhile, Annie threatens to transform, but that would serve to kill everyone besides herself. However, Annie would admit that she relates to Mikasa's sentiments as she just wanted to get back home to her dad. And so her point was that they should all avoid fighting one another until it perhaps becomes unavoidable in the event that Eren refuses. But oh man, here we go. This is where the episode really started to get obnoxious. For the most part, a lot of the prior issues are things that an anime-only viewer may not pick up on or notice, but good lord was this awful. As Hange and the general spoke of their plan, which would go on to also include some input from Yelena, who'd largely been ignored up until this point, we would have a very slow pan up to the top of the trees instead of any proper accompanying visuals. But disregarding that, we would learn a bit more about Yelena, and yeah, she is a weirdo. Not like we didn't already know that about her, but exceedingly so. But once she was exposed to be from Marley and was clowned, she would return the favor and roast everyone around her. But there are portions of this roast session that ended up being cut entirely. In the anime, when talking about REINER, Yelena wondered how many Eldians were eaten by pure Titans after he made a hole in the wall. In the manga, she did the very same, but furthermore, went on to bring up the fact that he snuck in and pretended to be comrades with the people whose lives he had ruined, that he betrayed and killed them, and yet again intends to act like their comrade. When it comes to talking about what Armin did, I'm really glad Yelena brought this up, because I know he is not talking about what Eren is willing to do when he did what he did. And at that, I really wish he could have said something about this, but whatever. But anyways, when talking about how John threw a thunder spear towards Falco to take down the Card Titan before, in the manga, there was a bit of eye contact between John and Falco, a bit of acknowledgement of the uncomfortable truth being brought up, but no, not in the anime. When it came time to talk about Sasha, we would get yet another slow pan of the forest. And listen, Yelena is so petty. This display actually managed to make me a fan of hers, as when John would attempt to clap back, she would be especially grimy and bring up the death of Marco. And again, while REINER was admitting to what they had done to Marco, we were taken to explore a slideshow of the forest. The most emotionally conflicting account by far was afforded no emphasis at all. In the manga, this was a universally uncomfortable moment for just about everyone, and it was written all over their faces. Meanwhile, again, in the anime, they've got the best poker faces possible. Mikasa and Armin look more interested in their soup than in the conversation. When we got Marco's final words, forest. It's obnoxious. And when Hange began to speak, we got a slow panned aerial shot of them all sitting around the fire, as opposed to, again, when the manga was a narrative driven by facial expressions. And listen, I know that to some viewers this may not matter too much, but it thoroughly ruins the events to come, where REINER apologizes and John flies into a rage. It lacks any sort of impact or depth. In fact, with the anime, it's pretty jarring just how suddenly John flips, and even then it feels more akin to annoyance than anger. Not to mention the visual jump cut that serves to avoid displaying the impact of the blow, which makes it feel weightless on top of everything else. Now in the manga, oh man, John was really giving REINER the beats, but we'll avoid showing that just because of how YouTube is. But don't get me wrong, it did look pretty vicious in the anime as well. The only thing is that the vocal inflections were lacking and didn't do the scene much justice at all. The Gabi portion of this scene was not bad, but the aftermath of it just lacked the emotions that made it so enjoyable in the manga. But at least Levi did a good job. When they were in the carts, John would express that he would not apologize to REINER, but what the anime cut out was John's admittance that he couldn't forgive him, followed by REINER saying that he knows. And for as simple as this is, it's again an emotionally charged moment. And that's the thing about this episode, it's not just about the dialogue, because as is, it's all stuff we to an extent already know about. These events entirely centered around talking, and even deeper than that, an attempt at understanding in what was absolutely and inherently an emotional exchange. And so once you remove scenes like this, when you remove the emotional depth of it all, quite honestly, the entire episode becomes meaningless. Beyond explaining how all these characters ended up joining forces, I would argue that an anime only has no need to see this episode at all on account of how they delivered it, and that's pretty awful. Now to John, Annie would question if she could be forgiven, which across both the anime and manga, I'm really not sure how to take this. A part of me wonders if it's supposed to be a joke or something, but obviously given the context, it's really not a good one. Not to mention she never receives an answer to this. But we would seem to get our answer as to why this episode was so poorly handled, and that's because the Jaegerists have secured the harbor and are completely geared up with anti-Titan artillery. So a confrontation of some sort is to be expected, but truthfully, if a bad episode was inevitable, I would have preferred the episode before this to be the bad one, as if the pie scene was going to happen either way, I can't say I'd mind the delivery being just as bad as the source contents. But as always, I am Sliceable Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.